Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Writing Well. We have Brian K. Morris here to talk to us about writing. Welcome.
Thank you very much, and good morning to you.
So, how long have you been writing?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me something like that, and I realized that I've pretty much written most of my life. That I can remember the Batman craze of the mid '60s and eating like a whole box of Raisin Bran, which I absolutely detested at the time, to get a set of Batman stamps, which had the little Carmine Infantino artwork on them, and I made little comic books with them. And I was
Mm.
always writing and drawing stuff like that. But it wasn't until seventh grade that I realized that I really wanted to be a writer, the guy who filled out all the pages in the books and all the word balloons in my favorite comics. So,
Hmm.
and so I've been working on it fairly serious ever since. About 20 years ago, I got really more serious about my freelance work, and then I went full time as a writer in early 2013.
Okay. So, how has your writing process evolved over time?
Well, at first it was the usual, I will write when the muse is somewhere in the vicinity, and whatever comes up, and I will just flesh it out, whatever they give me. And if it just stalls in the middle of the process, oh well. And through a number of failed manuscripts and trying to end things that just would not find an end, I learned to outline. I found a fairly decent outline that I use for virtually all my fiction. If you do a Google search for the Lester Dent master plot, you will find a four-stage plotting facility that really works for just about everything from short stories on up to full-length novels. And when I went full time with this and I decided to become a novelist, I used that same process of the four-stage plot in order to know when to introduce conflict, new characters, plot twists, etc. After starting with a log line, which is the easiest way to describe it is an elevator pitch, something in two sentences, two breaths. And I did this starting with my first book, Bloodshot, The Coldest Warrior. Never pass up a chance to plug. And it worked so well that I continued it through my other novels. And I can't see writing without that now, because with that plot in place, while it can change during the writing process, it still lets me know that I have a way to get to the ending, and that
Hmm.
there is a conclusion that makes sense at the end of it all. And like I said, it can change over the course of time as inspiration strikes, or you have a second chance to look at the plot and think, well, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And at that point, you can still change things before you actually start the fleshing out of the outline in detail. So that's worked for me, and ever since getting Bloodshot out, it's been a matter of little tweaks to the process in order to make it go faster, to make it easier, make it more convenient for me, and that way I can get to the production and editing phase a little more quickly, and that's how I'm able to grind out as many books as I can in so short a time.
Yeah. So, can you give me an example of something that you tried that didn't work, that you tossed out?
Well, in fact, when I attempted to write my first novel in 2013, I was going to take one of my old audio scripts. I worked briefly for a West Coast audio company, and I had proposed a series to them that they weren't terribly fond of, and they gave me some good criticism on how to alter it and make it a little more palatable. And I just sat down with that script and literally started writing. And after a point, I kind of got stuck because I was taking the criticisms, but not really following through on them and seeing how they would affect the plot from that point on. I also realized that I wanted to get something out fairly quick, something I was more familiar with. And so I did the log line and then the master plot to eventually what became Bloodshot. And the process worked so smoothly and so well that I applied it again to Sandestein. And that also started out as another script. That was a 10-minute play that had been rejected by several theater companies for being a little too irreverent. But everything I've done since then has been a tightening up of that process, and that's why I tell particularly newer writers that I think that's the way to go, especially when you're starting and you're trying to master the form and introduce all the complexity that you want in a standard novel. If you follow a pattern, which doesn't necessarily have to be a formula, I think it liberates you. In fact, I think it gives you the freedom to go ahead courageously and try to tell your story, knowing that you can change it as you go, but you have a framework to get you to a destination.
Yeah. So, you start with the log line and then you work it into this outline. How long does that process typically take you from sitting down to write the log line to when you start your first page of rough draft?
Generally, it can take as little as 2 weeks, I would say, all told. In the case of Volcana, that came together fairly quickly. But I'd been thinking about that character and that process for several months, in fact, prior to my sitting down and actually attempting to make a novel out of it. Whereas something like Conflict, which was a short story I wrote that I published in book form, or even Sandestein, probably took me, I'd say, around a month to get everything worked out, and then I could sit down and start writing. I have heard there are some writers who have a similar system to mine. It can take them up to 6 months to really plot something out thoroughly to their satisfaction, and then then it's a matter of just simply fleshing out that outline.
Yeah. So, do you ever have something happen as you're writing your rough draft that makes the entire rest of your outline obsolete?
Fortunately, no. I have had times where here is the path of the plot, and I'm kind of going like this, but still traveling in parallel to it.
Okay.
And we'll eventually hook up again later, but maybe not at the same exit that I had originally planned. And I love telling this story how I wrote in Bloodshot that I had created some characters that I intended to have die, and by the time I had finished the book, in fact, by the time I started the final chapter and started to wrap everything up, I realized that one of the characters had saved themselves. So I just, said, okay, fine. It's still a fine story. It works out. Volcana was a bit of a swerve from the outline in that I had kind of a page count in mind that I wanted to finish the book at. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to get her in the armor by this page. And of course, we sailed on past that because we were doing character stuff that I think enriched the character. And finally, I just said, well, hell with it. We'll get her in the armor when we get her in the armor. So that's why she's not in it until about 4/5 of the way through the book. But by then, I had succeeded in another goal, which was to make you like the basic character, the non-superpowered character, before she got her abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of those things where I let the muse in every now and then, but the outline and the log line help me remind that muse that we got work to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you do character sketches as part of your pre-writing process at all? Or
Well, I do. It's not necessarily that I draw them out or anything, because I lack the facility to draw well. I
yeah, I
do a
was meaning more
serviceable
like
job.
personality wise.
Yeah, personality wise, I do. I keep a separate form where I have outlined what the person looks like physically.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes if I have a model for them, I will make sure I incorporate those into the into the character outline. Also, something I learned when I was doing audio plays, that in order to get a hook on the character, I will frequently have the character describe themselves in 2 or 3 paragraphs, but in their own voice. And that really, really helps them become real in my head before I start writing them. And then, of course, as I begin the actual fleshing out process, yes, they will say and do things that I'll have to go back to my character outline and go, oh, I better add this to make sure I keep having them do that, which I take as a good sign, because then I think they're being changed by the events in the book, which is what we're going for. So we don't want anyone to be exactly the same when they finish their journey as when they start.
Yeah. So when you're adding those details back into your character sketch, do you do it in like a timeline so that you remember which things happen after? So say if you wanted to go back and write a prequel to
Mm-hmm.
Volcana, you could know which of her characters are she doesn't have yet. Does that make
I
sense?
do. Yes, that does make sense. That makes perfect sense. Well done. But yes, I do that. And Volcana is a good example of character traits that just started popping up as I started writing, such as finding out her favorite phrase is "shut up." Because for some reason, I kept hearing her in my head, and almost every conversation she had with somebody that she was having a conflict with, whatever degree or another, it usually incorporated the word "shut up." So that's kind of one of her catchphrases that helps me get into her head.
Mm-hmm.
But for her in particular, I had fleshed out an entire life story for her, pretty much from the time she left high school on up to the time that we meet her at the start of the book, and she's a blogger living out of central Indiana. And I can go back and I will deal with aspects of her past, and it helps that I've got that outline, because I know she's got a family life that we're going to have to deal with, where she's got an ex-lover she's still dealing with emotionally, that will probably wind up getting dealt with before the 7th book.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how far we've got it plotted. I've got sequels in mind for Sandestein, but no definite idea of where it's going. Of course, then again, I take my cues from the original Mary Shelley novel.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certain things I do want to do that she didn't, and certain things I don't want to touch, because I think that it veers too far away from what she started, and I want to have reverence for the source material.
Mm-hmm.
But in the case of Volcana, I've got this whole history that needs to be illuminated, because I don't know too many of us that actually escape our pasts completely.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff comes up to haunt you one way or another. And you can keep running until you just finally you have to deal with it. And she is going to eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, that always happens. I have a good story idea, and then I'm trying to figure out why those characters are the way they are, and then I end up having to write prequels about their parents. I'm like, okay, I guess I guess I can't start where I wanted to start. Whoops.
Well, you like to start in the middle of the action, get the reader hooked.
Yeah,
So.
well, like I have a series that I'm hoping to get all of the books done this year, the Intrigue series, and it's really 2 trilogies, but I'm calling it just one series that's 6 books and a couple short stories. Um, and the first story that came to me is book number 4.
Mm-hmm. Just like Star
Yeah.
Wars, and look where that went.
Yeah, I guess it's the same. It's not the same identical structure, but it is similar. I hadn't thought of that because like in between the first 3 books and the last 3 books, there's a couple short stories to like bridge the gap.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a short story, or I hope it's going to be a short story. It could turn into a whole novel. I have no idea. But that's like what made the evil guy evil, sort of like his
Mm-hmm.
origin story, I guess.
Oh, I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. That sounds
So
interesting.
3 short stories and 6 novels. Hopefully, knock on wood, that it will all get done because I know there are lots of people out there who are like, I want to read that book.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, it's not finished yet.
Yeah, and that's a good sign that people want to read what you've got coming up, because that
Yeah,
means you've made an
it's
impression.
exciting, but it's intimidating at the same time. Um, so what's your editing process like?
Well, the first 2 editing sweeps I usually do, because by the time I finish the first draft, I'm usually starting preliminary work on the next book.
Okay, that makes
Um,
sense.
because one, it gives me a little mental distance from the previous work, and 2, I just want to be a machine and pour this stuff out. Quantity and hopefully quality is my motto, one of them. But then I go back and I will do one full sweep, which will be the freaking glaring errors
Mm-hmm.
that just leap out and scream at you.
Like
The
you made a
misspelled.
stop sign neon green instead of red.
You do that too. Good. It's not just me. Uh, yeah, or it's the sentences that you discover where you had tried to rewrite them, but you didn't exactly take out all of the erroneous sentence.
Mm-hmm.
So suddenly you go A, B, C, R, S, T, U, and there's just no bridge in between them.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, then I go through and try to find spelling errors, and make sure my verb tenses agree as much as possible in the
Do
second
you
edit.
use Grammarly?
No, I don't. Uh, I don't know if it's because my style is so quirky that Grammarly just kind of like, oh, God, do we have to do this again? But I do have a process that I recently discovered, and I did it with my last 2 publications that I think is beautiful, and it works remarkably well.
Tell me more.
Oh, yeah, come closer, my dear. Um, you go online and look for free download text to speech. Whether you use Word or you use Open Office, which is my preferred word processor because it's free,
Mm-hmm.
you can get a plugin that will allow you to highlight a section of text, and then it will read back the text to you in a neutral, male in this case, voice. I'd get another voice, but I don't know how to switch it. Um, but it like, for instance, I will take a passage here, just think. She clapped her tiny hands together with a joy that threatened to overwhelm her. And I would highlight that in this program, and it would come back, she clapped her tiny hands together with a joy that threatened to overwhelm her.
So it's sort of a robot voice.
Yes, it's just this side of robot, and just, little bit of computer answering machine.
Mm-hmm.
There is little to no nuance. And I know that as a writer and occasional actor, I can't read. I can read the stuff out loud, but I feel self-conscious about it. So if I try reading it just in my head, I'm still trying to act it out. I just cannot help it.
Mm-hmm.
So this thing reads it back without any sort of warmth, any sort of emotion. And this way, it also catches words that are not spelling errors. Like, he took the form of a phoenix. But if you type it, he took the from of a phoenix, which is just a simple transposition of two letters, it catches that.
Yeah.
And it's time consuming, yes. But it just grabs all of your major errors as far as copy editing goes, and just just shines a light on them so you can fix them right then and there. Now after that, then I give it to a couple of people basically to beta read. One of them, whom is my wife, who's an excellent editor, and their job is basically to go through and just tell me what doesn't make any damn sense whatsoever. For instance, I had to rewrite a whole chapter in Volcana because my wife is like, "What is the point of this? How did you figure the ending matched up with the beginning of the chapter?" And I literally had to rewrite the whole thing, but it worked better as a result. Chapter 34, if anyone wants to check it out. So yeah, I remember.
So how do you go about finding beta readers, or did they find you, or how did that work? I mean, obviously your wife, you just talked to her, but the ones who aren't related to you.
The ones I don't have to sleep with to get work out of them, yeah. Well, my other beta reader is my cover artist, Trevor Hawkins, and he volunteered. He wanted to do it, and I've got a couple other people I'm going to draft into this because I probably should have more beta readers. It's just a matter of a lot of what I do is so quirky that I don't want somebody who says, "Well, gosh, you're a writer. I want to read your stuff." I read nothing but Harlequin romances, so I'm sure to like Sandestein. Yeah, right. So it's trying to find somebody who's simpatico, and I'm currently kind of researching how to weed out the bad beta readers right now. And YouTube is a great facility for learning about the writing process from people who are not at the John Grisham or Stephen King or J.K. Rowling level, but people who are a few steps above me, which was something I was trying to do in my recently deceased blog. So,
you should check out the stuff that the Sterling and Stone podcast network has.
Yes.
It's more audio and less visual, but I think you'll get a lot out of it. And the other thing I would suggest is, in business, they're always talking about making like an avatar for your ideal customer, right?
Yes.
Do that for your ideal reader, but don't do it as an avatar like the business people say. Do it the same way you already make your character sketches. Like, just get inside their head as you would get inside the head of Volcana or one of your other characters.
That makes
and then
you know
who you're writing for, and then it's easier to focus, so that when you make posts on social media or whatever, you'll be talking to whoever your ideal beta reader is, and then everybody else will ignore you. You're not talking to them. It won't resonate with them. So you'll get the attention of the people that you actually care about.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I do have my reader in mind when I write my stuff, and I figure it's somebody like myself at about 15 years old, who, when they discover somebody who's on the same wavelength, it's like somebody has thrown like a life vest to them. in the middle of a raging ocean. It's like, thank God I found you. There's someone else like me, somebody else who doesn't think like everyone else. So
Yeah.
that would probably be an interesting experiment to figure out who my average reader is. Of course, I don't have average readers.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. Well, I like to think mine are a little more erudite, better educated, cream of the crop, just like you. You know, and hopefully who succumb to flattery. But yeah, that is a good idea. That is an excellent idea.
So after you have your beta readers read and give you feedback, then you do another pass through and then you publish, or do you have another step in the process there?
I generally review it at least 2 more times myself. And again, it's kind of a repeat of the second and third sweep. Listening to the audio, and after I've incorporated the feedback, I do. And then a visual sweep of it, and then I go back to them again and say, well, here's how I have fixed it, and I might even send them passages, or in case of my wife, just hand it across the room, and see if this is an improvement over what they had read before. So mine may not be the most exact of editing processes, but it seems to work so far. Plus, it's a pretty quick process too. I'm glad to say. The one thing that frustrates me, and I'm sure that I'm a frustration for others, is when our senses of urgency don't quite sync up.
Yeah, that can always cause conflict.
Yes, it does, and it has.
A good way of adding conflict to a story.
Yeah,
one
except
person
this is
care.
real.
Oh, I need this device like yesterday. Why won't you give it to me? And the other person's like, well, I don't have it. It's like at my parents' house, and I don't want to talk to my parents, so I don't have any sense of urgency to give it to you.
That's right. Or the old thing about I have you first in my mind, shiny. So
yeah.
I run into a lot of that. And also there's a danger, I should say danger, I'm putting too much gravitas on it, but it can be an impediment when at my level, again, I'm not on the New York Times bestseller list. I have fans who on a following who I adore the heck out of, and I'm pleased to say they like what I do. I rely on people who are at my level in various things. And fortunately, the vast majority of people I deal with also share my sense of urgency, but occasionally I'll wind up having to work alongside somebody who doesn't have the same focus I do. And that, like I said, that can be frustrating. And if I suppose if I were to say, shell out big bucks for somebody who would do the same work, but do it PDQ, that would be one thing. But then again, I'm dealing with people who I know are more simpatico with what I am attempting to do. So that's more than ample compensation. Fortunately, I'm working on more than one project at a time. So if one project hits a roadblock, I can just switch to the other one and just keep working.
Yeah. So how do you deal with the conflict that can sometimes arise when your beta readers tell you something and you think that they're wrong?
This is the easiest. This is so easy. I just refer to the person who is paying for the printing bill. Wow, that's me. I am basically where the buck stops. If I were to get the same feedback from everyone that reads it, they're saying, Brian, you need to change this, then yes, I'm going to re-examine it and redo it. Unless it has like a greater importance. Say, something I'm doing in this book that I know is going to be part of a series, maybe I'm setting something up that they don't understand quite yet, but I don't want
Yeah.
to take my hand too soon. But I want to put this in this particular spot so that we can refer back to it and kind of enrich the reading experience further down the road.
Mm-hmm.
That happens occasionally, and yes, I am the last step in the process because I'm the guy who uploads it, but I'm also the guy who will take the heat for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't mind putting some element in that some people just won't understand, because I get to explain to them, hey, stick around for a couple books. Trust me, it'll all pan out.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. I'm pretty much the last step. So I have the final say. And I'm just arrogant enough to insist on it. Type.
I'm taking notes.
Oh! Oh my gosh, you didn't
Duh.
do that last time. You're throwing me. Stop it.
Sorry.
Go on with your bad self.
Yeah, no, so I can put some like bullet points together for the show notes so that people can find the links to everything and
There we go.
and get the short version if they're rushed for time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I don't do short versions, as many people have found out.
Let's see. So what would you suggest a new writer do to experiment with what works for their process, without wasting, not exactly time, but okay, let me start over. How would you advise a new writer to experiment with their process while still getting their novel done and finished?
Well, I would usually preach the gospel of the log line and the outline to begin with. I liken it to playing a musical instrument, where you start out learning how somebody else plays it. And as you gain skill and confidence, then you can play it in a way that is comfortable for you. For instance, I'm a big fan of a group called Postmodern Jukebox. And so you might take a song by, say, Justin Bieber and play it the way Justin Bieber played it. And then you turn around and put your own spin on it once you gain the skill to do so and the confidence to put it out there. Or just type whatever you feel like. I don't recommend that for people, but maybe they have to try it just to make sure it doesn't work. But I would say find someone whose work you appreciate, and if you can find out how they go through their own creative process, try to emulate that way of working and find out what does and does not work for you, which will, of course, happen during the course of your writing. Then when you do your next work, go back and look at how the process worked for you, not necessarily how you worked the process, and figure out ways that you could, if you need to cut a corner, if you need to add something to the process, because Volcana is actually my 6th book. I've got one, I've only got 4 books out in the public. One book is still in post-production, and has been for some time. And then my first book that I wrote when I was fresh out of college was such an abomination that when I moved recently, I made sure I found the manuscript and destroyed it. I didn't want this thing resurfacing. I'd rather find a sex tape of me and a goat than to have this thing pop out into the wild. Honestly, it was just too humiliating. Uh, but the thing is, my process has changed from Bloodshot all the way to Volcana, which is kind of the gamut of where I've been in the last few years. And again, like I said, it's a way to, I think, mine my ideas a little more thoroughly, plus do them a little more quickly, a little more efficiently, and to make the process as painless as I can make it for myself, at least. Because I'm the guy at the keyboard, I gotta do something. But basically make it faster, more productive, working smarter, not harder, with any luck. So
Yeah.
that's how my process evolves. And for my next book, I've already got in mind what I'm going to change to possibly make the process speedier and hopefully a little easier.
And that
Scrivener's.
Scrivener? Scrivener's
Yes.
awesome. I love Scrivener.
Yeah, I'm still going through the long form training on this because I want to get as smart with this as I can before I sit down to use it.
And a lot of people, I don't know, I think most people use one Scrivener project per book, but I do one Scrivener project per world. And I use it for, like, I have a Scrivener project for each website so that I can keep all of the blog posts organized and all of the, like, who I interviewed when for what podcast organized.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like Scrivener. It's amazing. So how do you force yourself to sit down and get your rough draft out?
That's pretty easy. I am fairly obsessed with this.
Okay.
I like the process of writing. I like the process of creation. It is not really a chore for me most of the time. In fact, the chore often becomes like having to be sociable with other people. For instance, I love going out to coffee because it reminds me occasionally that I have to actually leave the apartment. I have to put trousers on occasionally. It's just a nice thing to do. And that's why I get involved in outside things like community theater and such, because it gets me out of the house and I don't become Howard Hughes with 10-inch long fingernails and collecting my bodily secretions in mason jars while various people attend me. I don't want to be that guy. But yeah, that's where I'm at with the social thing. But I do like writing. I do like learning more about this, and I also occasionally, since I am becoming more of a seasoned citizen, shall we say, that I view a lot of years that I didn't have my focus as almost like time wasted. Of course, then in the process, I'm gaining life experiences that I hope enrich the work. But by the same token, I could have gone out and gotten those experiences, and I could have written them down, and maybe I'd be a little more prolific than I am now, or I'd be a little more skilled than I am now. So now that I'm starting to hear the clock tick a little louder, I'm thinking I want to get as much out as I can right now and leave this little bit of immortality behind. There's a lady who I've just recently discovered on YouTube, Jenna Morisi, who made a good point that once you put the book out there, you're immortal. Especially now with the electronic publishing and stuff, that you're out there forever. And unless Amazon goes completely under, which I think it's going to compete with Keith Richards as far as longevity. So there's little pieces of me out there, little representations of my life experience out there. Yeah. My life is an undead reconstruct, or my life is a super heroine. That's just on weekends. We don't talk about that. But there's just a little bit of me out there, and I kind of like that. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your process today.
Well, thank you for
I
having
learned
me.
a
It's always
lot.
a pleasure.